Today we're going to talk about buying and selling of watches. This is something that I love to talk about because number one, I feel that I am very good at buying watches and I'm pretty good at selling watches as well. Also, I consider myself a little bit of a watch flipper. I do buy watches with the intent to sell sometimes, but a lot of times I end up buying watches and maybe I just don't love them and I end up selling them. But 99% of the time I end up selling watches for a profit. There are a few times where I haven't, but usually I make money on almost every purchase that I make, and I'm going to explain how I do it in this video. So the first thing that I always do is educate myself on a watch. If I don't know everything about the watch, how can I buy that watch? There are certain versions that are worth more money than other versions. You need to know before you go out and try and buy that watch. So knowing everything about the watch, knowing about the movement, not only helps you know about the watch, but also helps you identify fake versions of the watch as well. But it also gives you the ability to find watches that are priced better than others. So I'm going to give you a very good example. It's a very good story about a watch that I purchased on eBay that was really well priced, and I ended up flipping that watch for about a $4,000 profit. It was an eDox. This was a minute repeater that was listed on eBay poorly. They actually didn't put the word minute repeater in the title or the description. They didn't know it was a minute repeater because they didn't do any of the research on the watch when they went to sell it. They just listed it as a plain eDox, which was a huge mistake. I actually went through the auction, I was looking at the photos, and I saw that this was a minute repeater, and I immediately made an offer on the watch. The person actually lived very close by to where I lived. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and I said, hey, let's meet up and let me take a look at the watch and I'll send you payment through eBay, through PayPal, and we'll do the exchange in person. They were okay with that. We met up in person in public. They brought the watch. I obviously brought my phone to be able to pay. They showed me the watch. I looked at it. It was a minute repeater. I then paid for the watch, and when I paid for the watch, I then pressed the minute repeater button. It chimed out perfectly. Everything was great about the watch, and I was very happy. The guy kind of looked at the watch sideways. He was a little confused that it actually made that noise, but it was his fault because he did not educate himself about the watch that he actually was selling. Therefore, he put it up for about $1,000. I was able to sell it for about $4,000 just a few months later. I actually fought with myself on selling that watch, but I ended up selling that watch, and I kind of regret that to this day, but that's for a different story. So educate yourself about the watch that you're buying. Educate yourself about the watch if you ever want to sell it as well. It's very important to know everything that you could know about the watch, whether you're buying or selling. Now, I think this is a very obvious point, but always buy for the best price that you can. I always look for people who have make an offer when I'm buying on eBay. If you're going on Chrono24 or places like Get Bezel, these are all marketplaces. I usually buy from marketplaces because you're getting the best price. They also offer authentication, which is awesome, specifically at Get Bezel. All of their watches are authenticated, and you can make offers on those watches, which is pretty awesome because usually you can get it much cheaper than the asking price. So that is really important. Always make an offer. It doesn't hurt. They could always come back to you and reject your offer or make a counter offer. Then you can make another counter offer. Try and get the best price that you can, because eventually, if you end up wanting to sell that watch, it'll be easier for you to not lose money on the back end on that sale. And that brings me to my third point. Always buy with the intent to keep. 99% of the time, even if I'm buying with the idea that I might sell this watch eventually, it might be something that I'm flipping, I am prepared to keep this watch. If I am not able to sell it for a profit, I am going to keep this watch and have no problem keeping it in my collection. If I want to sell it, I'll have to sell it at a loss. That's something that I'll have to deal with. And I have done this a few times and ended up selling something for a loss because I just needed to sell it or I wanted to sell it. And then there are watches in my collection right now that I haven't sold because I know I'm going to take a loss on it, and I just figure I'd rather wear it. Another point that I think is very important, condition. And I think a lot of people go crazy about the condition of a watch. If a watch has a couple of scratches, it's not that big of a deal. And in fact, it gives you the ability to bargain against that watch. So in other words, get a better price because it may not be in perfect condition. Box and papers, not a big deal for me, especially if I consider this watch a keeper. If it's not a keeper and I definitely want to flip the watch, obviously I'm going to look for box and papers, but it's not always 100% necessary. Box and papers is not the end all be all. There is one thing that you should always look for when buying a watch. One of the most important things, and I never hear people say this, extra links. If it's not on a strap, it's on a bracelet, get the extra links. Make sure that they have them. It may not even fit your wrist. If you buy it and it doesn't fit, a lot of times that can happen. Buying on eBay, there are watches that are listed that may not fit your wrist. Maybe they're very small. Maybe they are fitted to the person that currently owns it and they don't have the extra links. That means you're not going to be able to wear the watch when you get it. And when you try and sell it, you're limiting the audience that you could actually sell it to. So getting links is way more important than getting the box and papers, in my opinion. Getting box and papers is kind of important for a lot of collectors. So I'm not going to say don't look for box and papers. Definitely look at, especially if you're considering on flipping the watch, but links are more important than anything else. Obviously, like I said before, buying low, selling high with almost anything in life is what you want to do. But one of the things that you should always do is buy from a reputable seller. And I say that because they authenticate their watches. Authentication is very important because there are components of watches that are being replicated down to the screw today. And it is really hard to tell the difference between a real and a fake watch. In fact, Bezel recently sent out an email saying for the new year, celebrating the new year and all that they have accomplished, Bezel actually reject 33%, something like that, of the watches that go through their authentication process. That's because they are a marketplace like eBay or like Chrono24. However, all of their watches go through this authentication process. So that means 33% of the watches that go through are rejected, not only because maybe they aren't exactly as described, but some of them were probably fake and they catch those because they do their authentication in-house. There are other marketplaces that do this, but not for all of their watches. In fact, I've bought very expensive watches on places like Chrono24 and they were not authenticated. The seller has to be reputable. So now let's talk about selling a little bit. Marketplaces charge a lot of money to sell watches. So you're going to get charged around 15%, maybe up to 20%, depending on where you're actually selling from. Currently, eBay is around 22%, which is really high. And when you sell a watch for $1,000, you're not getting $1,000, you're getting under $800, which is pretty incredible. They're keeping a big chunk of your money. That brings me back to buying smart. Buy low, sell high. You need to buy as low as possible so that when you go to sell, you're going to get the highest amount of money you can. These marketplaces are great because you get a wide reach. You reach thousands and thousands of people. If you have a small network of people that you're able to sell to, that's great also. Those are great places to sell. However, you're not going to get top dollar all the time. And it's a little bit more risky when you're selling in those situations as well. Sending a watch, receiving money, things like that, it's not as easy. However, you do get to avoid all of the fees, but you're not reaching a very big audience. So it depends on what you're selling. If you're selling something that is cheaper, those places are great. If you're selling something that's more expensive, you want to reach a bigger audience because the audience is obviously very small for a very expensive watch. And it makes sense to go to a marketplace like eBay, Chrono24, or Bezel. So we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about how to actually list a watch properly. So you're not only protecting yourself, but you're also providing more information to the buyer so that they can make a decision and you won't receive a return. Number one, list the watch properly. Put as much information as you can find about that watch. Put as much information as you have about the condition of the watch, how many links you have, how many scratches are on the watch, how often it was worn, when was the last time it was serviced. These are all questions that people will ask. Also, take as many detailed photos as you can. Make sure that they are clear, that you can see the watch properly in different lighting. You can see every scratch that is on the watch. Make it look as good as you could make it look, but represent every single scratch so that people can see what they are actually buying. I'm gonna give you another really good story about this. It's another watch that I purchased on eBay. It was a Jacques Giraud. This was a all black DLC watch. I paid around $1,500 for this watch because it looked like it went through a rock tumbler. The pictures that they had up of this watch were blurry. It had fingerprints all over the watch, which looked like scratches. I reached out to the seller and I said, hey, is this watch scratched? Does it have a lot of scratches all over the side of the watch? On the glass, it does not look like it's in good condition. They came back to me and told me that the watch was in perfect condition. I asked them for an extra photo. I asked them to clean the watch. When they took the photo of the watch, they sent it to me. It was in immaculate condition. It came with box and papers, which they did not list in the actual auction, which was crazy. They sent me a picture of those as well. I made an offer of $1,500. They accepted it. I received the watch. It was in perfect condition. I wore it for a very long time, and then I ended up flipping it for around $4,500. So that gives you a really good idea how important good pictures are of a watch. If you put up bad pictures, people aren't going to bid. They're not going to ask questions about it. They're going to assume it's in terrible condition and they want something that's in better condition, so they'll just move on. This is a really big problem for a lot of auctions out there. So definitely put all the right information in the auction, put all the right information in the title so it's searchable, and of course, put really good photos. Last but not least, after sales. I know I'm just a regular guy. I don't have a business that I'm selling watches, but I still take after sales pretty seriously, because if someone does ask me to return a watch, I always accept returns. I want to have a good reputation, whether it's in person or online. I want people to know that I'm willing to take a return, that if there's a problem with the watch, I'm willing to fix that problem. Now, there are problems with places like eBay, specifically eBay, which is terrible. They allow people to return watches 3 months after they've owned that watch, and PayPal will allow 6 months. I'm not joking, 6 months. It's happened to me. I've sold a watch. I've sold many watches on eBay, and one time I sold a watch on eBay. It was for around $350. I sold the watch 4 months after that sale. The person came back to me and said, I'm no longer satisfied with this watch. Now, people change their minds. They no longer want something. I completely understand that. If it was within 1 week, I definitely would take a return. However, this was 4 months later, and I said, listen, it's 4 months later. I cannot take a return. eBay said I didn't have to take the return, so I just went on my merry way and I said, no, thank you, no return. However, because PayPal is allowing returns up to 6 months after the purchase, they were able to go through PayPal. They had to force the return on me. They also charged $15 to my PayPal account, which is really insult to injury. And of course, I had to give them a full refund for the watch. I received the watch back. It was heavily worn, scratched. It was sent to them in brand new condition. What I received back was a heavily worn watch, a watch that had been worn for 4 months, day in, day out, and they were not gentle on that watch. So I lost money in that situation. I ended up selling that watch for $50 after that because it was in such bad condition. Really disappointing. PayPal and eBay, the way these things work, they really don't keep the seller in mind. So you need to keep that in mind as well. The seller is always at a disadvantage. Usually being nice to a buyer does help. So if you are nice to the buyer, maybe they will feel bad and not try and take advantage of you. I try and be as nice as possible, and again, as accommodating as possible, because I want to have a good reputation. But it's stories like the one I just told you that really make these places frustrating, and I do find PayPal and eBay very, very frustrating. And really the last thing I want to mention on this video, and one of the most important things when I'm looking up a watch, when I'm buying a watch or I'm selling a watch, this applies to either. look up that watch on the internet and see what they have sold for in the past. You could look at all different websites, but eBay have a really good resource. You could just go into the advanced search and then of course hit sold items. When you do that, it's gonna pull up all the items that were sold for that specific search. So if you're looking for a Seiko SBDC061, a watch that I recently sold on eBay, you can see what those have sold for. If they all sold for $350 or around that number, I know pricing mine around that number will get it sold and it will sell relatively quickly. If I price it for $650, it's probably not going to sell and it's just gonna sit around for a very long time. If I price it for $250, it's going to sell immediately and I'm leaving $100 on the table. So if you are selling or you are buying, you need to look up the price of the watch. So again, if you make offers and you bide your time and you find the right one and you end up paying $300 for that SBDC061, you're buying very low. You'll be able to sell that watch for $350 when you're able or ready to sell that watch if you no longer want it, and you won't lose money on it. Sell as high as you can. And of course, do the research. Do the research on the watch and also do the research on the price, whether you're buying or selling. Tell me what you guys think about all of these things that I said in this video. Like I said, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've been buying and selling watches for probably around 20 some odd years. I love watches, but I do end up selling a lot of my watches. And that's why I know so much about selling watches. And I buy a lot of watches. That's why I've educated myself to the point where I try and buy as smart as possible. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. Is there anything I missed? Throw them down in the comments. I'd like to hear from you guys. Is there anything that you would do differently than what I've said here on this video? Tell me down in the comment section below. Anyway, guys, thank you for logging on. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. And I will catch you guys in the next video.